Hey everybody, welcome back to another Unity VR VRTK tutorial. In this video, we're going to be doing something pretty cool. This is going to be split up into two parts because it's going to be kind of long. I'll explain what each part is going to be in a little bit. First, let me show you what we're going to be making, and I'll preface that by saying that you should probably be pretty familiar with Unity for this tutorial, and I would go ahead and watch our previous videos as well just to get an idea of how VRTK works. Just the basics of some VR stuff. So let's dive into the headset and see what we're going to be making today. So basically what this is a whiteboard, and you got this whiteboard marker here that you can grab by pressing the grip button on the Vive controller, and then you can come over to this wall and draw on it, just like a normal whiteboard. Now keep in mind that this solution is not perfect. There's still some kinks that I haven't been able to work out, but I think it's a really good jumping off point for something like this. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to have a different Unity project open over here, and like we did in the last video, make sure you've got VRTK added to your project, and then you can go into VRTK examples, and then you're going to go ahead and duplicate this 002 controller events scene, and that's what I've just got open up here. Alright, so once we've got that out of the way, we need to add a couple of scripts onto our left and right controllers. We'll just do it on the right controller for now, to make sure that we can get the input events and be able to grab the whiteboard pen. So we're going to add VRTK controller actions, and this will allow us to call some different methods belonging to the VRTK controller class, such as activating haptic feedback and things like that. And then we can also go ahead and get rid of this VRTK controller events listener example. We did this in the last video as well because we don't need it. Okay, and then we're going to need two other scripts. We're going to need VRTK interact grab, and that's going to bring along this VRTK interact touch for us. And basically what these do is let you interact with the grabbable and touchable objects that you'll see here in a bit. So like I said, this video is going to be two parts. This first part is going to be setting up the scene and getting the basic collision detection with the whiteboard down, and then the second part will be cleaning that up a bit and then actually drawing on the whiteboard. So I'll explain how we're basically going to do that, but first let's set up the scene a bit. So let's add a couple of objects. We can have this nice little cube to put the pen on, and then we can clone that, rename it whiteboard, and bring it over here. We can scale it up. Obviously, if this was real, you could make it like flat, but this is fine. Okay. And then we need to make our whiteboard pen. So let's make an empty object because it's going to consist of a few different objects. We can call it pen. And then we're going to need a few things. We're going to need, let's see, a cube, the handle. Let's move this over. Okay. And the handle, we need to scale that down a ton. Now I've played around with these numbers, and it seems like this is pretty reasonable, just for the feel of like what a whiteboard marker would feel like in your hand, but you can adjust those if you'd like to. So, all right, so we've got that handle there. Now let's add another one, and let's add a cube for the tip. Okay, so the tip is also needing to scale down. Whoops, and we'll put that back in. There we go. we can rename this tip, and then we can move that up about like there. Alright, so we've got our pen, the tip, and the handle. We can move that over. And then let's go ahead and make a material for the tip, just so we can give it a color. So I've got my assets stored in this this example folder, and then in my materials. You can put that wherever. So I'm going to create a new material, and we're just going to give it a blue color. Alright. That is a pretty nice looking pen there. Okay, so let's get this pen grabbable. So what we need to do is basically VRTK includes a script called interactable object, and that's going to allow us to do touch interactions and grab interactions, and then for our own whiteboard we need to be able to extend that so that we can add some like our own custom layer functionality on top of that. So we're going to make a script. I'm just going to put it in my scripts folder called whiteboard pen, and then I'm going to go into this script and make it extend the VRTK interactable object. Okay, so first we need to make sure we are using VRTK, and then we're just going to change this to extend VRTK interactable object. So this makes the whiteboard pen an interactable object, and then I'll go ahead and drag that onto the pen. Okay, you'll see it's going to add in all these parameters that we can change that belong to the interactable object class. First thing, let's change the highlight color to something that's not black. Let's go yellow. And the highlight color is basically when you touch it with the controller, it'll highlight to indicate that you can pick the object up or something, you can interact with it. So then we need to turn on is grabbable, and then for grab attach mechanic script, we're just going to we need to add a component, a couple scripts here. So we need controller appearance, and this will let the controller disappear when we grab the pen, so it's just the pen acting as kind of the controller now. And then we need a script to track to the controller, so we're going to use VRTK track object grab attach. Now if you search through the VRTK components, there are a bunch of these grab attach scripts. You've got custom joint, fixed joint, rotator, track, spring joint, track object, and they all have different ways that they attach the controller with like different joints. And I found through the documentation that this script track object grab attach is pretty much the best for this scenario when we need the pen to interact with like other world objects, because the pen has a rigid body on it, which we need to attach. So let's add a rigid body, and then we can just leave that as the default parameters. Okay, last thing on whiteboard pen, just select for grab attach mechanic script the pen, and then secondary grab action script you can do pen as well. Actually we need VRTK swap controller grab action, and then we can do pen. Okay, so assuming this is set up, let's run it and then see what happens. So it would seem that it is working. Kind of running into my monitors here, but you can see that when you touch it, it does the highlight, and then if you hold, it'll grab it. And I dropped it there. And you can see that when you grab it, the positioning, the rotation of the pen isn't really what we want. So let's go ahead and resolve that. Another quick thing, you can toggle off this hold button to grab. And then it'll just be like a toggle. So you press the grip once to grab and then once to release. And I like that a lot better for this type of thing. Okay, so in the pen, let's add an empty object and call it grab point. Now just to reiterate what the issue is, when we grab this, I'm running into my desk. You can see that like it's not the way I'm pointing the controller. Like this is a weird, awkward way to draw on the board. So we need to change what the grab point is, so that when you grab the pen, it'll face as if you were realistically grabbing a pen in real life. I'm gonna go ahead and move this closer to myself. Okay, so we've got this grab point object, and I've toyed around with this, and I found that these numbers give a pretty good indication of where it should be. So I just changed X to -150 rotation, and then you'll see that when we grab it, oh, we've got to assign that first. So back in the pen, we've got a thing called right snap handle and left snap handle, and you're just going to assign that to grab point. There we go. That feels a lot more natural. So if I turn off the grab visibility thing, then the controller will still be visible when we grab it, and then you can see it lines up pretty nicely with the controller, that rotation. So I'll go ahead and toggle that back on. Alright, so now let me explain how we're going to get this drawing to work. So basically, let me just hop back in here. So what we've got right now is a pen that does nothing against this wall. Now, we're not going to try and detect collisions with the wall, because I found that to be a bit wonky. Just the way that the track object grab attach kind of interacts with other rigid bodies, it's kind of weird. So we're going to do a ray cast from the tip of the pen. So basically, if you don't know what a ray cast is, it's just drawing a line to see if there's anything in between the two objects, and then we're going to specify a distance for that to act as if we're close enough to touching the board, and then we'll know that we can draw on the board. So in that whiteboard pen script, let's just open that back up, and we can add a bunch of stuff. Okay, so let's do a couple of things. First, let's actually create another script called whiteboard and assign that to our whiteboard. And then let's also add a tag called whiteboard. And assign that to the whiteboard. And this will just, oh no, I was in play mode still. Assign that to the whiteboard. And then give it the script. And this will just be an easy way to manage if we had multiple whiteboards. We can tag them all as a whiteboard, and then give similar experiences for all those. Alright, so we're going to hop back into the scripts now, and then we'll open up that whiteboard script as well. Alright, so first thing, let's create a couple of public variables in whiteboard pen for things we're going to be using later on. So we're going to need a whiteboard for our whiteboard. We're going to need a raycast hit can just call that touch. And then we will do, yeah, that should be good for now. Okay. So in start, we need to assign the initial whiteboard script that we're looking at here. So we're gonna just do this dot whiteboard equals game object dot find. We named it whiteboard. And then get component whiteboard. Okay, so then that'll assign that script. Now in the update function is where we're going to look for that raycast. So we're going to be doing the raycast from the tip of the pen. So let's get the height of the tip so we know how far the distance for the raycast should be, the max distance. So we'll call that tip height. Transform, so we're on the whiteboard pen, so we just get the tip object, and then we'll do transform local scale y, and that should give us that 0.03 value. And then we're gonna get a vector 3 of the tip. That's just gonna be the tip. Okay, and then let's do the raycast. So the basic syntax for this is going to be if physics.raycast from tip, and then the direction is going to be transform.up, because we're going in the up direction from the pen object. And then we're going to do out to the touch, so we get that raycast hit, and then our max distance is going to be tip height. So if we get that raycast, well, let's first check if it's to a object tagged as a whiteboard. Otherwise, we don't need to do anything for this. So not touch.collider.tag equals whiteboard. And then we will reassign this whiteboard component in case it's a different whiteboard. So this dot whiteboard equals touch.collider.get component whiteboard. Okay, now let's take a pause here and debug some stuff. So let's just debug that we are touching. Alright, so let's log that, and then let's try it out. Assuming everything is set up, this will work. This will work great. Okay, so hop into there. You can see you've got this guy. Alright, let's hop over to the console. There we go. So you see, let me clear this. Once we get right up to that board, it's going to start touching it. And you can see that's where it gets a little funny with the collisions. So it's, if you were to be drawing on this board, it wouldn't really work because of the way that it's going to mess up the pen like that, unless you could hold it perfectly still. So let's try and resolve that a bit. Exit play mode there. So my current solution for this, it's not perfect, but I think it's a good start, is to basically lock the rotation of the pen if you are colliding. So, and then to unlock the rotation, you have to pull a little bit further away from the whiteboard. So basically, let me just go back in here. Once we are detecting a raycast, we're going to lock the rotation of the pen. So I wouldn't be able to move it like this. It would just follow the controller around like that. And then once you pull it far enough away, it'll go back to normal. But we want to lock that rotation so that as you draw, it doesn't do this. It would just stay straight down. So that's kind of the solution I've been rolling for this example right now. There's probably an additional way, but I'm not sure. So if you have any suggestions, let me know. So let's first set a boolean, put a boolean up here called last touch to track if we touch during the last update. So we only want to set this if we have just started touching. So if we are not currently touching, if last touch, if not last touch, then we're going to set last touch to true. And then we also want to track what the last angle was. So let's create a private quat last angle, and then we'll just set that last angle to the transformed rotation. Okay. Then in this else for the physics raycast, since we're not detecting the raycast, we are not touching the whiteboard. So we know that much. So we're just going to set last touch to false. Okay, and then at the end of our update function, we're going to say if last touch. So if we know that we are touching the whiteboard, then we're just going to set the rotation of the transform to last angle. So let's see if this gives us any improvement. All right, let's grab this. Okay, so you can see once we're touching it, you see how it snapped there and it kind of locked into place? That's a lot more like what we want. And you can see as, let me toggle off the visibility so you can see what the controller is doing. So you'll see that as we push the controller through, the pen stays relatively stable. You can see it jumping around a bit, which isn't ideal, but let's add some haptic feedback to the touch of the whiteboard so that we know that you're colliding with it, and that'll make it kind of a better user experience where, like, yeah, you're drawing on the board, so you don't need to shove all the way through. Even though this works, it does jump around a bit, and that's one thing I haven't been able to figure out, just because the way that the track object grab attach script works. But yeah, I'm open to suggestions if anybody knows how to fix that. Okay, so let's add some haptic feedback. So what we're going to need to do is finally hook into this VRTK controller action script that we assigned way back when. So let's hop back into the script. So let's create another variable for VRTK controller actions component. Just calling controller actions. And then, okay, so what we're going to do is override a function in VRTK interactable object called grabbed, and then we can get the VRTK controller actions component off of the controller, which will be the grabbing object that it provides as a parameter. So let's do public override void grabbed, and it's going to be game object grabbing object. So this is going to trigger once the controller actually grabs the object. So let's call the base method. see. You can see the definition for this. Called automatically when the object is grabbed initially. Also a virtual method to allow for overriding and inherited classes, which is what we're doing. Okay, so call that, and then we'll just assign the controller actions. So we're getting that off of grabbing object, just get component. Okay, so now we've got that script, so we can use it inside of the update function. So we know that once we've been grabbed, it'll be fine to detect that raycast. You could do a check to make sure that we have controller actions, but I'm not going to bother with doing that. So after we've assigned this script, let's just do controller actions dot, and then we can see all these methods that we have. So we've got toggle highlight grip. There's haptic feedback. It is called trigger. There we go. Trigger haptic pulse. So we're just going to provide it. It's between 0 and 1, and I found that 1 is really strong, and it kind of rumbles way too much. I've actually found that 0.05 is a pretty appropriate value for this. So let's go ahead and try that out. So now whenever we get that raycast with the whiteboard, we are going to rumble the controller. So let's grab it. And then, not sure if you can hear it, maybe, but it does do that haptic thing. So now you can kind of tell that once you're at the whiteboard, it's drawing it. One last thing before we stop part 1. Let's increase the distance to unlock the rotation a bit, or unlock the raycast rather. So you can see that the distance is not a lot. That's where it starts touching, and then when it stops at the same point. But for when you're drawing, if you're like writing something, I found that there's kind of a sweet spot where you naturally move far away enough where right now it would stop and it doesn't play nice with the drawing mechanics. So it's a bit better to have it increase the distance that you need to lock off. And this is pretty easy to add as well. So before we do the raycast, we'll just say if last touch, so if we're touching, we're just going to increase the tip height by 10%. And that'll give us a little bit more range. And you can play with that value just to see what works. So now, it's hard to tell exactly, but you can pull a little bit further away. And you can hear that haptic. Okay, I think that's a good place to stop. In part 2, we're going to be doing all the drawing stuff for the whiteboard, and then fixing up the collisions a bit. So I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.